first of all, I'm going to ask Yael if you could introduce yourself to everyone.
Yes, hi everybody, good afternoon. My name is Yael. I work here on the employment team at Work Avenue. Nice to see some familiar and new faces as well. My main role here is I look after our jobs board. So that involves speaking to all of the employers who advertise vacancies with Work Avenue and trying to match clients we meet with those roles. As well as that, I deliver some of our training, including one-to-one interview practice for anybody who has a real interview coming up and would like to do a practice run beforehand as well. So nice to see you all today.
Great. Richard, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Richard Linden. I'm an employment advisor here at Work Avenue. I've been here now coming up for 3 years, probably been an employment advisor in total for over 6 years now. And the majority of the work I do here is one-to-one appointments, but also get involved obviously in workshops and at the moment webinars and other things like that on the employment team. Nice to see you all. Thanks.
Fantastic. And I have one other member of my team working today, and that's Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah Dehan. I'm one of the employment advisors. So my job's the same as Richard. I help with everything to do with finding jobs, CVs and careers guidance. And if you need an appointment after this, then I'll be able to help you with anything to do with interviews or anything similar.
Thank you. Now, we're all fairly experienced now in the world of webinars, and this is something that seems to have, taken hold of most of us in our private lives and also in our working lives. And the same rules apply this afternoon as they do to all webinars that we do. The first is we would ask you very politely to, if possible, stay on mute at all times. Sometimes having too many people not on mute means that you get a bit of interference and echo, and that's not helpful. So please stay on mute. If you have any questions, please use the chat facility. I will be monitoring that throughout, and I'll be able to manage questions and just make sure that they're asked at the right time and in the right way as well. And I would say if you have a question, guaranteed it won't be stupid. Please do ask the question.
Okay.
Please do
just
ask.
So you're aware, you can do this. Okay.
Richard, are you with us? Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I've got some people cleaning next to me, and it's just come to the point where I'm about to do my presentation, and they're right here next to me, moving all my papers around. Sorry, Emma, carry on.
So don't be shy. Do ask your question. It will not be a stupid question. If you have a question, the chances are other people at the same time also want to know the answer to the same thing. So do ask a question, pop it on the chat, and we can manage that, which will be fantastic. Stay on mute. And I should say, as a matter of courtesy, that we are recording this session, so it will be available should you wish to take another look at it afterwards. Our webinars are available on our website, /webinars, I'll remind you at the end, and also on our YouTube channel as well. Okay, enough of the introductions. Richard Linden, over to you to talk about interview skills.
Okay, hello again, everyone. So I'm going to give a short presentation on succeeding at interview. Okay, I'm just going to quickly share my screen. So I hope you can see this okay. This is what I'm going to look at. This is what I'm going to talk about. So firstly, we're going to look at the purpose of an interview. Then we're going to look at how to prepare for an interview. Then a little bit about body language. Obviously, we all know how important that is when interviewing. Then we're going to look at video interview tips. Obviously, that is very popular now. There are some employers doing face-to-face, but most interviews are over video now. Then we're going to look at a little bit about types of questions and competency-based questions, and then just a recap at the end on how to excel at interview, going over the main points. So I'm going to come back.
Say
yes.
With us for all of this. It sounds like a lot we're covering, and it will probably be about 20 minutes or so, but please stick with us because the fun will really start after that, because then we are handing over to other people to do some mock practice interview questions and hopefully show you the difference between what bad looks like in response to an interview and what good looks like. And that's where the fun will really start. So stick with us and let the webinar unfold.
Okay, and as Emma mentioned, if whilst I'm going through this, you've got any questions, then put them in the chat. If it's about something I'm going to cover later on, then obviously we'll come back to it. But if it's specifically about the section I'm talking about, then please obviously do that. I might not see it, but I can guarantee Emma or one of my colleagues will. So first of all, purpose of the interview. Well obviously, from the employer's point of view, it's to see who's suitable for the role, so see who's the most suitable. From your point of view, obviously, from the other side of things, you're gonna show the employer, you're gonna try and impress the employer as much as you can, and show them the best version of yourself. And actually, we say that it's very common amongst sort of careers advisors. We say that there are 3 things that an employer is looking for. Firstly, and probably most obviously, can you do the job? Do you have the skills and experience to do the job? But that's not the only thing employers are looking for. They're also looking, do you fit in? That they want to see whether you're going to fit into the organization, the dynamic of the company, the type of industry. So do you fit in? Will you get on well with the team? All that sort of thing. And the third thing that employers are looking for is, are you going to stay there? So really, the main purpose for you at the interview is whether you can tick all those boxes. And usually, if you can tick all those boxes, you're in a good position. You're very likely to be considered for the role. So that's the first thing, purpose of an interview. Now, preparation. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to prepare for an interview. So many times I see clients that have, they've done a little bit of research on the company and they've kind of thought about the job a little bit, but they haven't what I would call properly prepared. I actually think you need many, many hours of preparation to properly prepare for an interview. And it's things like, well, the obvious things like who is going to be interviewing you? How do you find out who's going to be interviewing you? Can you check them out online? Can you find them on LinkedIn? Can you check them out on their company website? Do you know a bit of background about them? Is it only one person interviewing you, or is it going to be multiple? Is it going to be 2 or 3 people interviewing you? How do you finding out who's interviewing is important. Also, very, very basic, but when it's going to be, how long it's likely to be, have a think about that. And quite obviously the type of interview, whether it's going to be video, face to face, what the sort of procedure is going to be for the interview, what format it's going to be in. Do you know if you've got to give a presentation? I think it's a very bad company that doesn't properly inform you of all these things. But if you're not sure, then you need to ask. Whether it's the recruiter or the company themselves, you need to find out exactly what you're up against so that you can best prepare for it. And if you're not sure, and you're going to call a company, make sure that you write down all your questions before you call the company. There's nothing worse than asking, when the interview is and what format it takes. And then after the phone call, you get off the phone and you suddenly remember, oh, I forgot to ask them whether I need to give a presentation or not. There's nothing worse than that. So make sure you write down all your questions before you call the employer or the recruiter. Other forms of preparation, very obviously, have a think about what questions they're likely to ask you. There's loads and loads of resources online for that where you can find these things out. Have a mock interview. So at Work Avenue, we offer mock interviews. If for whatever reason your interview's the next day or in 2 days and we can't squeeze in a mock interview in time because of our workloads, then get your sister, your aunt, your cousin, whoever, to do a practice interview with you. Very, very important. So you can get used to answering questions. Other things you can do, research the company, research the industry. If it's an industry you've never worked in, to research the industry. But that's all very important preparation. The next thing on my list, was that question, Emma? Was that question about that? I didn't read it.
Sorry, yes, there is a question on the chat. Someone has said, if there is little about the company on their website, where else would you research?
Yeah, very good question. You might find them on LinkedIn. You might find news articles on the website somewhere. You might find a little bit about them on the advert, where the job was advertised. If it's advertised on Total Jobs or Indeed, there might be a bit of background. If it's a really small company, then there may be little that you can do. I mean, I would personally possibly have that as one of your questions. So when you call up the company to ask a bit about the job, or a bit about the interview process, then maybe you could ask a little bit about the company there as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to, yeah, go on, Emma.
Yeah, people have put on the chat. So someone has added, Glassdoor can be quite helpful for finding out about the company.
Oh yeah, very good point. Yeah, people leave reviews. You need to be careful with that one though, because do you believe people? I
think there are very few businesses these days that don't have some kind of presence on social media one way and another, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram, whether it's LinkedIn, because businesses want to be out there. They're not trying to hide away. Typically, they want to be out there, so it's unusual. There's also Companies House if you want to get sort of the more regulatory information about a business as well. It would be very unusual not to be able to find anything. Someone else has just put down, ask for an annual report. I think there's a point, if you don't mind, Richard, just to sort of, you need to know a little bit. You need to be in the zone of the business. You don't need to know to the nth degree everything about them. You're not going to be tested on, your absolute knowledge of the detail of the organisation. But Richard will come on to more about that in a minute.
Yeah.
Other people have said ask for an annual report, which can be helpful. And very helpfully, as someone said on LinkedIn, find people through LinkedIn who you might know who work for that organisation, connect to them and talk to them about their impressions, what they know about the business.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think I mentioned that in one of my later parts of the slide. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing to talk about is body language. Now, it's really important that when you're preparing for an interview, that you're and actually this comes with practice. This comes with practice. The more you practice and the more confident you are, the better your body language are. So when you're actually in an interview, be really thinking, or even video interview, be really thinking about how you're sitting. Are you slouching? Are you leaning? Are you twiddling with something? Are you playing with your thumbs? Are you twisting your hair? Body language is so important. In fact, a lot of people say 80% of communication is non-verbal. So actually, someone could give a really good interview, but a lot of it's missed because the body language isn't in sync with the confidence of what they're saying. Likewise, someone could have really positive and strong and confident body language, and actually what they say in the interview isn't as good as it could be, but because their body language is so strong, they can give across a good interview. It's amazing what the things you can see with this when you've delivered interviews. Many years ago I was a recruitment manager, so I used to see a lot of this sort of stuff. Obviously very important to smile. Eye contact is very important, and if you're familiar with the term mirroring, it's actually very good to mirror the person that's interviewing you, because it makes them feel like you're going to fit into the organization. It makes them feel at home with you. And what we mean by mirroring is kind of copying their gestures. So if they're kind of speaking quite loudly and confidently and boldly, then if you speak really quietly and like a mouse, you're not going to come across as well. Likewise, if they're quite softly spoken, don't be brash and loud, because you're more likely to be the sort of person that goes up against them and not with them. So mirroring means kind of trying as best as you can to sort of copy and be a match to the employer. So that's body language. Did any questions come through about that? I wasn't looking.
One person has made a very good point of, make sure we are going to come on to this with the video interviews, I'm sure. But do make sure you look into the eyes of the person you're talking to. Engage properly with them.
Yeah. And what's even more important about that is when it's a video interview, you might not know. You might be looking what you think is in their eyes, but because of the webcam is on one side of the screen or in the center, you need to know where you're looking. But anyway, we're going to come on to video interview tips now. So there you go. There's the first video interview tip for you. Make sure that you know where you're looking in a video interview.
One person, Richard, has also asked, apart from company information and practice questions, what else would you suggest in preparation? That the main thing you need to prepare is all about the practice questions, as opposed to the company information. That's a small part of it. And that's what we're going to be moving on to shortly with the practice questions later.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so one bit of advice for you with video interviewing is practice it beforehand, whether it's on Zoom or on Skype. Practice it beforehand. You know, make sure that you fully know how your Zoom and Skype works. Make sure you've got the right settings. You know, make sure that it's all set up, that nothing goes wrong, and learn from my mistakes, because I've had appointments with clients and it's taken me about 6 or 7. When we very first started lockdown, we started doing Zoom, it took me at least 6 or 7 client appointments to fully know all the functionality of how Zoom works. So don't just try it once, try it a few times. And actually, one real advantage of video interviewing is you can record yourself, which is amazing. Everyone wants to know what they're like at interviewing. Have a practice interview, like a mock interview with one of the employment advisors here at Work Avenue, or with your sister or your aunt or your cousin. Have a practice interview and record yourself and watch it back with, you know, a friend or whatever, and you'll notice things that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise. So that's a really good tip for you with video interviewing. Check your internet connection. Okay, is there a room in your house that doesn't work particularly well? There's nothing worse than being in an interview and not having a good internet connection. And sometimes the person doing the interview won't even know that it's not a bad interview, that it's a bad connection. So check with someone at least at different times of the day to see whether or not it's a good place in your house for internet connection.
On the subject of which, Richard, I've got a very, very good question, which is, how important is your background?
What you mean when you're answering the question?
No, when you're on.
Oh, your background. Yeah, that. Yes, sorry.
Not your antecedents, not your personal history.
Oh, right. Yeah, your background is really important.
And see that I'm sitting in a room in my house, and Richard's sitting in the office, and Hannah, my colleague, has got a background behind her. So we're all doing slightly different here. Do you want to have some thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Sorry. If you go to settings, you can make a blank background.
Yeah, don't have cleaners in the background like me if you're giving an interview. Yeah, make sure that if you are doing an interview and you're not going to do a background like Hannah's, where you've got a picture or an image or something like that, just make sure it's clean and tidy in the background. Make sure there's no boxes lying around or rubbish on the floor or anything like that, because obviously this is your first impression. This is your professional impression that you're giving the employer. I think I've mentioned some of the other things I've got noted down here, but make sure you dress appropriately. So dress for a video interview exactly how you would dress normally for you know, a proper interview. Dressed up smartly with a shirt and a tie. You don't actually need to dress smartly, believe it or not, with trousers. You can wear shorts if you want. You can wear your pajama bottoms, because they will never see them, unless you make the mistake of getting up and you know, getting a glass of water or something. So don't do that.
I would add, though, that there is something to be said that when we are dressed in a certain way, sometimes for some people it can put us in the zone of focus and professionalism.
Yeah.
Everyone's different, but if you're one of the people that thinks, I'm slobbing in my pajamas, therefore mentally I'll be slobbing in my head as well, then I would suggest that you do put on something a little bit more appropriate and businesslike, because it will help your head get into the zone of where you have to be for the interview. But only you know yourself. For some people it's an issue, for some people it's just not an issue.
Yeah, and don't sort of sit on your bed, you know, having your pillows in the background or anything, like, for the same reason. Yeah, very good point. Were there any questions about that, Emma, that came through?
No, apart from the background question. The only thing I would say about backgrounds is sometimes they can sort of interfere with the trueness, if you will, of you. They sort of the edges of you sort of meld into your background and disappear into the background a little bit. So sometimes people don't like them so much, but on the other hand, it's definitely better to have that than have a distracting background that distracts the interviewer from you, because you are the focus of the interview, not your background, not your home, not the cat that's walking across your keyboard, not your 4-year-old child who wanders in for a glass of water. You know, the focus has to be on you, because this is a job interview at the end of the day.
Yeah, and one more thing to say on video interviewing that I think is very important is make sure that the name that appears on your screen. So mine is Richard Linden, Emma's is Emma May. Make sure it's appropriate for the interview. So, you know, if it's your mum's computer or your wife's computer, don't have their name on it. It just doesn't look very professional. Likewise, don't sort of have your nickname or, you know, Spurs are the greatest or something like that on it. So yeah, video interview tips. Next point is types of questions. So make sure make sure you fully are aware of all the generic sort of types of questions that could come up for your interview. It won't just be generic questions. I mean, you know, you've got all the standard ones that I'm sure you all know, like tell me about yourself, why have you applied for this job, etc., etc. But it won't necessarily just be about that. You know, you also might have industry or job specific questions. You know, they might ask you about, I don't know, sales targets in your previous role, or who your clients were, and that sort of thing. But yeah, so just be aware of all the different types of questions that could come up and practice them. Make sure you really know how you're going to answer these questions. What I advise people to do is a week or literally whenever you hear it, as soon as you hear about the interview, get out a notepad and pen or open up a notes file on your computer and start writing down all the questions you think you're going to be asked and the answers you're going to give to them, and actually spend sort of half an hour a day updating it, reading through it, because believe it or not, the way the subconscious mind works, you begin to, if you do it every day, you start to begin to think of better answers to your questions each time you read it. So it's a really good tip for you there. Don't forget, of course, all the questions that are, you know, that might throw you, like the curveball questions, things like, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time, or what is your weakness? That's something we'll come on to shortly. But yeah, really think about all the questions you're going to be asked. And that leads me nicely on to my next point, which is competency-based questions. Employers very commonly for many years now have asked competency-based questions. Competency is an area of skill that's required of you. So it might be communication or teamwork, but the employer will know what skills and attributes they're looking for in their candidate, and therefore might ask questions related to those. So things like, could you tell me about a time when you have, you know, worked in a team or had good attention to detail, etc., etc. And actually, there's a really good way to answer these questions. It's called the STAR method, and STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. And it's a really good formula for composing a really good answer to an example that you need to give. I won't talk too much about that now, because you know, you can look up lots of info online for that. And actually, in our next part of this webinar, you're going to see an example of that. So you can see an amazing example of that shortly. Before I do a recap, Emma, were there any questions?
No, we're up to date on the questions.
We're up to date. Okay, so that's my general advice at how to succeed at interview, how to prepare, what to think about for the interview, whether it's a video or face-to-face. Just a couple of really important things to emphasize again. Obviously, do all of the things I've mentioned, but most importantly, it's all about your preparation. It's all about how you prepare in leading up to the interview. You know, possible questions, who will be interviewing you, researching the company, all the things we talked about in preparation is really key. You know, it's like anything. What you put into it, you'll get out. You know, even if hardly any of the questions that you research don't come up in the interview, but just by you doing that and investing the time in preparing for it, you'll generally feel more confident about the questions you do answer.
Yeah, I'd like to endorse that, and then Elle wants to have a quick word too. But I'd like to endorse that and say, you know, I liken it very much to going into an exam. There's very few of us who would approach taking an exam without doing revision. We have absolutely no idea what it is that's going to come up on the exam paper, but we know that the more revision we put in beforehand, the greater the likelihood is either that something will come up that we've revised, so we know about that, or failing that we will have revised something that we can adapt and modify, and we have a greater chance of being able to do it if we have revised. So the more you've practiced and prepared the classic interview questions that may come up in advance, looking at the specific components of the job and making sure you can address to the employer how you can meet the demands of the job they have to do. The more you prepare those sorts of areas, the greater the likelihood is that you are not going to be caught out, that you will be in the zone to be able to answer the questions that are asked for you. Before we go on, I'll come back to you in a minute, Yael, but someone has asked, is it okay to ask about terms and conditions if they do not mention? We will come to questions that you ask at the end of the interview. It's a very important part of the interview. Most of the interview focuses on the questions that the interviewer asks you, but at the end, there's always that point where they say, do you have any questions to ask me? And we're going to talk about that at the end of this session as well. Yael, did you want to say something before we moved on?
Yeah, just quickly, you've covered quite a bit of it now. I just wanted to say in terms of preparation, because somebody was asking other things to prepare, other ways to prepare, especially for competency style questions, you want to be having a look at the person's specification for the job. So the list of experience, skills, attributes that the employer has asked for the candidate to have to be able to do this job well, because most competency questions are based around those areas. So if you've gone down that list that, let's say, says strong communication skills, experience in customer service, able to solve problems, for example, and you've got an example in your mind for each of those areas, it's very likely that one of those questions is going to come up if the interviewers are matching the questions to the job. So the better you know the actual job and the requirements of the job, the more prepared you're going to be for any answers around that, especially the competency questions, which do require preparation.
Okay, now Lydia has put on the chat, what about if we get very excited in the beginning? Advice, please, on how to manage that. I'm not quite sure what you mean, Lydia. I'm actually going to unmute you. Lydia, go ahead. Oh,
yeah, the question is actually that when I start to speak in the beginning of the interview, I get very nervous and excited. I don't want to put it as nervous, and I'm feeling like my heartbeat is going up, and so I'm the couple of minutes is like trying to deal with my body instead of answering the questions, focusing on the questions. So how can I manage that beforehand?
Look, I think everyone gets nervous for interviews. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Employers know, that people generally get quite, as long as you see it as a bit excited, and as long as you're aware of it, because if you're aware of it, you can sort of consciously focus on calming yourself down a bit when you start talking. It's when you're not aware of it that it can come across, not the right way. But it's just nerves. And
I would also say that the more you prepare, the more you will be in control of the situation you're going into, and the less likely you are. You will have a way of controlling some of your nerves because you have prepared better. I think if you believe that you can walk into an interview without having done that preparation, and suddenly you realize, oh my goodness, I'm about to go into an interview, that you feel out of control then, and that's very, very nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So the more preparation you do in advance, the greater your level of control.
Yeah.
And someone has actually put on the chat, Ruth has said, I strongly believe that any interview is a two-way process. Yes, it is, and absolutely so. And it's a very good lesson to remember. You are interviewing, you are also considering whether you want this job. And if you believe that the way you've been handled through the interview process, or what you've heard about the company or the questions they've asked, don't make you feel good, comfortable, confident, in the zone, whatever you want to say. you know, all of those things can have an impact on whether you decide that the job is for you, as well as them deciding whether you are for them. All you can do is prepare as best you can and be the finest version of yourself, and give yourself the best chance in that way. I think we're going to move on now to talk about some of the questions that are actually asked, because it's quite helpful to hear what bad sounds like, what's an inadequate, maybe bad's a bit strong, but certainly what inadequate interview answers sound like, and also what stronger ones sound like as well, because there are huge differences.
Okay, so first question is the obvious one at the start of almost every interview.
What we've done, let me explain. I thought you were going to explain. What we've actually done is that Richard is going to be interviewer here, and he's going to ask questions of two candidates who've come for the job. And the job in question is the office manager of a small charity. So it's a job that might be quite attractive to some people here. Obviously, what everyone's looking for is different, but that's the assumed role we're talking about. And two candidates have stepped forward. One of them is called Hannah Dehaan. She's come for the interview today. And the other one is called Yael Solomons, and she's also come for the interview today. And Richard is going to ask the same question of both candidates, and we can hear the difference in how they respond, and we'll see what inadequate sounds like and what strong sounds like. So over to you, Richard.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Okay, so firstly to Hannah, first question. Tell me about yourself, Hannah.
So I've got one kid, and my name's Hannah, and I used to live in Nottingham. So I like to do a bit of reading on the weekends, and like to go shopping and see my family. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit about me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And same question to you, Yael. Please tell me about yourself.
Oh, hi. So I'm Yael. I've been working for the past few years in the area of office management and administration. And most recently, I've been working for a small property business, so I have quite a varied role with the different office management and admin tasks, such as customer service. I look after all the office systems. I look after the database and report some things off the database as well, and a little bit of financial administration too. And so in my spare time, I do like to do a lot of voluntary work for charities, and I'm really looking for a role that's in a charity now. I'm looking to use my transferable skills from my office management professional experience and bring that into a new role in a charity, and that's really why I was really excited to apply for this role and be here today.
Brilliant.
Okay, Richard, which is the candidate that you favour and why?
I slightly favour Yael. I think what Yael did that was great was, even though she hasn't got a huge amount of paid work experience working for a charity, she mentioned that she does some charity work some voluntary work in her spare time, and then she really enjoys that. And obviously, because the job is office manager for a charity, that's a really good thing to add in. She also made it very clear right from the start that she's got the credentials, she's got the abilities to do the job. And she said it in a very nice tone. She was very confident and came across very well. So that was Yael.
With Hannah's answer, how did you perceive that as the interviewer?
So Hannah's answer, well, first of all, it was very short. She didn't really tell me her suitability for the job. She talked about irrelevant things, really. Things like where she's from, the fact she's got a child, and what she does in her spare time. But the worst thing about it was probably the body language. She was sort of swiveling in her chair a little bit. She was twiddling. I think she was twiddling with her hair. Was she? Yeah. So yeah, that obviously came across really badly in that interview.
We've had a question on the chat from Gary who says, is it reasonable to ask questions of the interviewer to clarify the question? And I say yes, very reasonable. Very much so. Two reasons. Firstly, always check your understanding. If in doubt, definitely check your understanding of the question you're being asked and qualify that. And secondly, in so doing, you buy yourself a little bit of time. to answer a potentially difficult question. You know, it gives you time to, although, you know, you can be all calm on the outside, you can be furiously gathering your thoughts and deciding how you're going to respond with those extra nanoseconds that you get by qualifying your question. Definitely ask to qualify.
So can I just say, sorry, for this question, tell me a bit about yourself. It's really tell me a little bit about yourself in terms of why you're the right match for the job. So a summary of your skills, experience, education, sort of why you're here today. So if they say, tell me a bit about yourself, I would think of it in those terms. I don't know if you need to then say to them, what do you want me to tell you? I would start along the professional line. And then, you know, if there's something personal that's also relevant, add that in, but stick to the professionals, the majority of your answer.
Elena has asked how to answer questions about family and children. Now, this is a really good question, Elena, because we're saying that don't give those answers in a question, tell me about yourself. Focus very much on the demands of the job and how you match yourself to the demands of the job. But as you've rightly recognized, sometimes employers, even though they shouldn't, do ask personal questions about your family, your children, your private life. Always answer courteously anything you've been asked in an interview. Never be hostile, never, you know, whatever. But I would say if they ask you questions that are private questions that don't relate to the job, just answer them as briefly as possible and try and move back if you possibly can without being too pointed about it. Move back to always addressing questions about your suitability for the job and your match in terms of your skills and experience for the demands of the job. But obviously if they ask it, answer it.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, next question. I'll do this one first to Yael.
Might be
Why?
bad
Oh,
question.
okay, all right, we'll do the bad one first. Yeah. Okay, so Hannah, why does this job appeal to you?
So I live really locally, and so it'd be really easy for me to get to in the morning after I drop the kids off. And I noticed that you've got parking right outside, and that's just perfect for me.
Great. Thank you very much. And same question to Yael. Why does this job appeal to you?
Well, first of all, as I mentioned before, I'd really love to work in a charity. I know a lot about your charity. I've had a look at what you do. I know quite a lot of people who've benefited from your services. So I'd love the opportunity to be part of the work that you do. And also when I had a look at the job and the job spec and what you're looking for, I really feel that my skills and experience match the role. For example, I've got a lot of experience in updating and managing data, which I saw as something on your job spec. I know you work with a broad range of clients, and that's something that I've very much done before in my previous roles. In my voluntary work, I've been involved with organising and coordinating a number of events, and I know that you have events that take place, and this role involves liaising with suppliers and helping with that as well. So I really feel, for all those reasons, I would be a good match for the role, and this is an organisation that I'd love to work for as well.
Great, thank you very much. So obviously Hannah's answer wasn't great.
Why not?
Well, you know,
why did
yes, yeah, okay. So really this question should be not only selling yourself for the job, but also showing them that you'll be a great asset to the company. And Hannah's main concern was getting parking outside and that the company was local to her. So in other words, it was all about her. It wasn't about the company. And to be honest, even if it is about her, it's not the end of the world if it's a really well answered question. But the things that were most mattered to her was not that it was going to be lots of great opportunity for her and that sort of thing. It was about parking outside and the fact that she was close by. So not great things to say in an interview. Yael's answer, on the other hand, was really good. She mentioned she showed the employer. She showed me that she'd actually learned a lot about the company, a lot about the charity. You know what sort of work is going to be involved. She'd properly read the person's spec. She knows people that have been helped by this charity. So she's obviously passionate about this charity. So yeah, it was just generally an all-round, very well answered question. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Emma.
Simply that, as ever, every question that you're asked in an interview is an opportunity for you to demonstrate to the employer exactly what you have that you can deliver against the job, that is job relevant. And Yael did exactly that. As you said, Richard, Hannah only viewed the world through her own perspective, what was useful and good to her. And that can be quite annoying to an employer, because an employer simply wants to know that you're going to be helpful to the job, you're going to move the company forward, you're going to give to the business, not necessarily take from the business.
Yeah.
So always think about what you're offering, what you're giving, and not what you're taking. We have had one interesting question from Gilly, who asks, how and when do you bring up a disability and how do you present it? Anyone want to answer that? If not, I will, but
yeah,
go on.
Really and truly, you don't bring it up at all. There's no need to bring it up, likewise, like the last question, they shouldn't ask you about your family, really, but some people do. So if they do ask you, if it's very obvious, let's say you come in to the interview in a wheelchair and they do ask you, they shouldn't, because legally they shouldn't. But if they do, you just have to answer it in the best possible way you can, as long as you focus on your ability to do the job and you show that you're really dedicated, really enthusiastic, really positive, then that's all you can do, I think. But really and truly, they shouldn't ask whether you've got any disabilities.
Okay, I'm just going to unmute Gilly, because there might be a nuance to her question that Gilly, do you want to just nuance your question? Because if it's about if your question is about reasonable adjustments, I'm not sure whether that's what it's about, or whether what angle you're asking from, because I think I might be able to add some more to it if I know.
Yes, in my case, in any company that I work for, as you can see, I'm wearing a headset, and I use voice activated technology to do my job. So if I'm in an open plan office, everybody's going to hear what I'm saying. And my voice activated technology does not work well with some common office software. So that is something that I would have to bring up, because I would need certain adjustments made by the company for the job that I'm doing. So I can't go without actually bringing it up.
So I think in answer to that perspective of disability, the first point I would make is that people who have any form of a disability, whatever that form is, very seldom apply for a job that they don't regard themselves as being capable of doing. So the premise is that you've applied for the job for just the same reason that everyone else has applied for the job, because you think you can do it and deliver against it. Then you want to be in a position, you go through the interview process as you would normally. If you were here, you'd be wearing your voice activated technology, but you are still answering the questions and asking the questions in just the same way as any other applicant. The important thing is, be the person who the employer wants to hire. And then once you become the person, in other words, the preferred candidate, and then it will be very easy for that employer to want to make adjustments for you, and very straightforward for the employer to make adjustments for you. Now, it sounds like I'm sort of prevaricating a bit and basically saying, don't let them know anything negative about you. And actually, to an extent, I am, because going for an interview is a competitive process. It's very seldom that anyone who attends an interview is the only person going for that interview. You're up against other people, and you want to put yourself psychologically in the position where the employer wants you and you alone to do the job. Once they've made that psychological mental leap into wanting you as a successful candidate, then they will do anything they can to keep you, because you are the person they want. But if you mention things that you don't know how they're going to react to anything you say, so if you put yourself into a high-risk situation where you're mentioning something that there is a perception they may take badly, you allow them to balance you against other people, and they may therefore choose someone else and opt you out of the process early on. So they may not, but you don't know that. So be the person that they need and want first of all. Be the successful person, and then negotiate what it is you want or need. Be that relating to your disability, and a reasonable adjustment is not a difficult thing for an employer to do, particularly for a preferred candidate. or be it for something else. Maybe you want to leave one day a week early to go and collect your children from school. But once you are the desired candidate, these things suddenly become so much more available to you than when you're competing in an open market against somebody who's not asking for the same things. This is very practical advice. It may not be what the law says, but we're not talking about the law here. We're talking about getting a job in a competitive space and being the preferred candidate. We're talking about real life, not the law.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so we're going to do another question. This is a competency-based question. So first of all, to Hannah, can you give me an example of when you've worked in a team to achieve a positive organisational outcome?
Well, I think I generally always really work really well in teams. I've been with some really difficult teams in the past, and they've always been very jealous of me, but I still seem to work very well. So I'd say that's a strength overall.
Okay, great, thank you, Hannah. Same question to you, Yael. Can you give me an example of when you've worked in a team to achieve a positive organisational outcome?
Yeah, sure. So in my last role, I worked with 2 colleagues on a project to clean up our database, and the GDPR legislation was coming in, and our data was spread all over the place, many different spreadsheets, some handheld paper records. So we needed to really bring it all together in one centralized place. So I sat down with a couple of colleagues, thought about all the things that we needed to do, collating, cleaning up the data. We were going to find a new CRM system, so identifying one for our requirements, and generally getting to grips with the new GDPR legislation. So I took responsibility for bringing all the data together and cleaning up our database. So I took data from wherever we had it, brought it into one Excel spreadsheet, took out duplicates, tried to update client information, whilst my colleagues were doing the other parts of the role. We all came back and met afterwards. We'd found the right sort of CRM system for us. We uploaded all the data, and going forward, we have everything in one centralized place. So we're able to access it easily, we're able to report on it quite easily, and also everything is in line with the data requirements under GDPR.
Excellent, thank you very much. So you'll see from that Hannah didn't really answer the question. The question was to give an example. And she didn't actually give an example, and that's very common actually. Having done lots of mock interviews over the years, it's quite common for people to do that, and it's the wrong way to go about it. Just to say that you're generally quite good at working in teams, or that you've worked in teams before. And actually, I think Hannah used the word difficulty. I've worked in difficult teams before, which is almost a bit of a negative way of looking at it anyway. But yeah, she didn't give a proper example, whereas Yael, on the other hand, did give. She gave a proper star example. With it. She first of all described the situation where she was working, what she was doing. Then she talked about the task. In other words, what the team what the team had to do. Then she talked about actually how she did it, the action, and then of course the result at the end, the outcome of which was very positive, that it all went well. So how not to do it and how to do it. But really know when you're answering these questions that you are giving an actual real life example of what you've done, rather than talk generally around the subject.
Richard, I think we're missing a question.
Yeah, we're missing 2 questions, but I'm just wondering whether I should just do one of them because of the time, Emma.
Well, we have, yeah, we don't have that long left. I would like to very quickly, if we could address the weakness question, because I think that's quite an important.
Okay. All right. So let's do that. Hannah. Oh, yeah. Hannah, can you tell me what are your weaknesses in relation to this role?
Yeah, so I'm not really that great at Microsoft Word, or Microsoft Excel, or Microsoft Publisher, but I'm guessing you'll train me on the job, so it'll be okay.
Okay. And same question to you, Elle. What are your weaknesses in relation to this role?
Well, I guess I've been working, as I've said so far, in the commercial sector, and moving to the charity sector is a slightly different culture and sort of organisational structure. So there'll be probably some adapting to do in that area. However, I really feel that, first of all, that I have the skills for the job. I hope I've shown you that. And also my passion and enthusiasm for your organisation and for working in a charity. So I think I can bring all of that to the role, and I think I would adapt quickly once I started, if I was fortunate enough to be offered the position.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so, yeah, go on.
So what you can see is that Hannah effectively offered what I would call a showstopper. This isn't for an office manager, and she basically said she knows nothing about the technical skills required to do the job. So never offer to an employer something that is going to be a showstopper for the job as your deficiency or your weak area. What should you offer therefore? Well, I would say that you should offer something like Yael offered. In other words, it was a genuine deficiency for the role. She said she'd never worked in the not-for-profit sector before. But she didn't give her employer, or the potential employer, any nasty surprises. The employer already knew that because he would have seen her CV and knew that she had never worked in the not-for-profit sector before. And it's also not a showstopper. She explained that culturally she may be a bit unfamiliar, but she certainly had the transferable skills, and she was passionate about the charity as well. So no nasty surprises to an employer. No showstoppers that are really going to prevent your application going any further. Suggest instead something that they probably can already know about or infer from your previous experience in your CV, and something that isn't going to, put them off too much, exactly as you did.
Yeah.
And the final question I think we need to ask is the one that we ask, where the interviewer asks you at the end of every question. Richard, what is it?
Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah.
So do you want shall I ask them both, or do you want to just talk generally about it? Okay, Hannah, do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, so I wondered what the salary was, and also I've got a holiday booked, and I just wondered if that would be okay. And is it okay if I finish early on Mondays so that I can pick the kids up?
Cool, thank you very much, Hannah. And Yael, have you got any questions for us?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could tell me more about the different roles within the team. Also, I saw on your website you did a certain event last year. I just wondered if you're repeating that, or how your events have changed because of everything happening with coronavirus. And also just what a sort of typical day is like in the office in this role.
Great. So the main difference there you can see is Hannah's questions were very much about her again. They were about how much she was going to earn, what the salary is, whether she could have Monday afternoons off. And she's not really shown by answering. And I think one of the questions in the chat, Emma, if I'm not mistaken, was when do you ask about salary and benefits? And the interview is definitely not the time to ask about that. It's really, you're trying to create the best version of yourself to get the job. And that is not by what's in it for me. How can I get what I want out of it? So Yael, on the other hand, showed that she was really interested in the organisation. So asking questions that, what's an average day like, or how have your event schedule been affected by coronavirus? It shows that you're genuinely interested in what the organisation does. And I think that's the best way to answer that question.
So I think, in short, what you need to do is prepare fully, think about everything through the eyes of the employer. Think about what they want to know about you. And of course, what every employer wants to know is that they're hiring the person has demonstrated that they can match the demands of the job as best as possible. Not that they like the job because it's 5 minutes from home, or they can pick the kids up, or they've got parking, or the canteen has good food, or whatever. These things are not going to impress an employer. The employer is there to focus on the person who can do the job best. So make sure that comes through in the way you answer the question. Rain wants to ask a question about references. So I'm just going to unmute you, Rain. Oops.
Sorry, right.
Hi. Hi.
Oh, well, so if you are offered the job, do new companies have to have a reference from your previous employer? And what happens if they let you go, which is what happened to me the last time?
Well, what I would say is it's down to companies whether they ask for references. Some do, some don't. And when they've asked for references, sometimes they ask, for more detailed references, and sometimes they just ask to confirm that you've been employed on certain dates. It depends on the circumstances. Very often, it's very what companies do is what they do. And I think if, being let go can happen for a number of reasons. And I think if that's the case, whatever the reason, you need to have a conversation with a previous employer that requests that for any future reference that they may be asked for, that they, if maybe they're happy to give a positive reference, if they've let you go because of financial concerns in the business, that's one thing. If they haven't seen eye to eye with an employer, that can be another thing. But it's a very harsh employer that doesn't want to allow an ex-employee to move on with their life and find another job.
That's what I'm thinking. But
so you want to have
a
conversation with the previous employer.
Yeah. Would you recommend a conversation over the telephone or an email conversation?
I personally think a real conversation with a real human being is normally more persuasive, particularly if it's somebody you know. If you can stomach having the conversation with that person, then I think that you do pick up the phone to them and explain the situation, that you want to work again, and B, you need to work again. And it's a pretty harsh employer who wants to prevent you having that onward opportunity by saying, I'm going to give you a poor reference, or I'm not going to give you a reference. So I think appealing to their better nature is the best way forward. Even if it's just to confirm that you worked for them from such and such a date until such and such a date.
Right.
Some employers don't even ask anymore because there have been examples where there have been lawsuits and things, and it's all been a bit ugly over references. So, but if you're in any doubt, have a conversation. And I would say, if you're going to ask someone, use someone as your referee, do show them the courtesy of asking them first. I've sometimes been approached for references and I haven't even been asked. And I always do it, and I always do it with good heart. But I think to myself, it would have been nice to have been asked. It's just a courtesy, a human courtesy.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're coming to the end of our time now. It is technically 3:02. We could talk for hours and hours about interviews. We the Work Avenue team can actually talk for hours and hours about all aspects of the job search and finding work. And we would love to have the opportunity to talk to all of you about such things if and when they're relevant to you. We can do this in a number of ways. If you have an advisor and want to make an appointment to talk to your advisor, phone the office. The number is 020-8371-3280 and make an appointment. Or else visit our website, which is theworkavenue.org.uk, and go /meeting. So it's theworkavenue.org.uk/meeting. And you can request a meeting with an advisor online, so you don't even have to pick up the phone. So we can do that for you. We're also running employment workshops to really delve into the detail of the CV, your transferable skills, how to reach out and network, how to use LinkedIn, all of the important things that you need to prepare for when you're trying to take your job search to the next level. So again, you can book those workshops online. Alternatively, you can ring the office to do so. Everything, literally everything, is available on our website. So do visit our website and take a look. And I would also say that this webinar that we've run this afternoon is the latest in a series of ongoing webinars that we've been running. A few weeks from now, on the 28th of July, we'll be running another webinar, the subject of which will be volunteering your way into employment. It can be done, it has been done, and it's a really, really powerful way of finding work. So I would urge you all, we haven't advertised it yet. You can go onto our website and book, but it hasn't been heavily advertised, but it's available there on our website. So do take a look, do sign up, and we hope to see you on future webinars. If you have any other questions, all of our contact details are on the website. That's for myself, Emma, my colleagues Richard, Yael Solomons and Hannah Dehaan. We're all on our website, and our email addresses are all on our website. So you can email any of us directly to ask a question about this or indeed about anything else, and we'll be so happy to help. I wish you all well, and looking forward to seeing you at another Work Avenue event. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Many thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.